There is definitely a way, a direct cause and effect that could have led these kids and other people to be warned to get the heck out of this area. There is no doubt they could have gotten almost everyone out before it happened. I do also want to talk about the story of the day, which is the ongoing search in Texas. So many children killed in this flooding. And they're continuing to try to identify the dead. They're still trying to see if there's anyone who might be rescued. Time is running out. It is a heartbreaking story. There are a lot of questions about how this could have been avoided, right? You can call that the blame game. But they're important questions about what could have been done, what should have been done. And we're not going to know all of the answers yet. But if you listen to a press conference on Friday of various Texas officials, they sure sounded like they were blaming the National Weather Service. This is number 28. You're first going to hear the Texas Emergency Management Chief, then the city manager of Kerrville, one of the hardest hit areas, and then the Texas Department of Emergency Management Chief, Nim Kidd. Let's listen.
The original forecast that we received on Wednesday from the National Weather Service predicted 3 to 6 inches of rain in the Concho Valley and 4 to 8 inches of rain in the Hill Country. We worked with our own meteorologists to fine-tune that weather statement, and as many of you know, and many of you in broadcast journalism and meteorology, you can go back and look at your own forecast, and the amount of rain that fell in this specific location was never in any of those forecasts.
This rain event sat on top of that and dumped more rain than what was forecasted on both of those forks. When we got the report, it was about 7 feet or so on the South Fork, and within a matter of minutes, it was up to 29 feet, and all of that converged at the Guadalupe, and that's where we saw those very quick rise in flood.
But listen, everybody got the forecast from the National Weather Service, right? You all got it. You're all in media. You got that forecast. It did not predict the amount of rain that we saw.
All right, so let's really dig in on what they predicted, because there are some who are now saying that the reason that the National Weather Service didn't predict it accurately was because of cuts by the Trump administration, because of DOGE cuts. And it's true that there are cuts that have been made, but most of those cuts have not gone into effect in a significant way. And if you talk to the folks who are there, and even to objective meteorologists, it sure sounds like that is not the cause. So I think it is unfair to blame the Trump administration for this. You can say that climate change more broadly is a concern and it can lead to more events like this, okay? But that doesn't mean it was the cause of this. You can say that the National Weather Service didn't say early enough how bad it was going to be, but they're not God. So let me take you through the timing of this, right? A flood watch was issued by the National Weather Service at 1:18 p.m. on Thursday, all right? That is 16 hours before the heavy stuff hits. They were predicting up to 7 inches of rainfall in south central Texas. It's true that if it had just been 7 inches, it would not have been as bad. But that is a flood watch that has been issued by the National Weather Service, all right? I've been reading every article I can to sort of try and put together the timeline here. So as the rain starts falling hard at midnight, Thursday into Friday, the first flash flood warning is issued by the National Weather Service at 1:14 a.m. Now, in theory, that warning should have led to a major response from local emergency management, local media, putting out the word, etc. 3 hours later, the most serious warning comes at 4:03 a.m. when the National Weather Service issues a flash flood emergency warning of, quote, an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation. It urges immediate evacuation to higher ground. That's still, the worst of it apparently hits around 6:45. So, but at that point, if they had acted, they could have still gotten out. Now, is that the fault of the camp? Is that the fault of the community? Unclear, but I think it's unfair to blame the National Weather Service because, you have Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut saying accurate weather forecasting helps avoid fatal disasters. There are consequences to Trump's brainless attacks on public workers like meteorologists. Now, again, you can say that you disagree with the cuts. What you can't do is say cause and effect to what happened here. The National Weather Service forecasting offices were operating normally at the time of the disaster, said Greg Waller, service coordination hydrologist with the NWS West Gulf River Forecast Center in Fort Worth. We had adequate staffing, we had adequate technology. This was us doing our job to the best of our abilities. Now, there are a few job openings, and this is according to the Texas Tribune. There's nothing to indicate that staffing was the issue here. This was July 4th weekend. RV parks, cabins filled with tourists who might not be as in tune with the flood risks. And between 2 and 7 a.m., the Guadalupe River in Kerrville rose from 1 to more than 34 feet. That's 5 hours. The flooding reached its peak at around 6:45 a.m. When the National Weather Service issued its flash flood emergency, and I'm now quoting from the Texas Tribune article that's called In Texas Region Prone to Catastrophic Floods, Questions Grow About Lack of Warning. And I now quote, when the National Weather Service issued its flash flood emergency, the river height was still under 2 feet, although it began to rise quickly shortly after the alert was issued. Major flooding on the river is considered anything above 20 feet, a level the gauge recorded a little after 6 a.m. on Friday. So again, we may learn more, but the folks who are blaming already the Trump administration, Grant Stern, executive editor of Occupy Democrats, it only took 9 days for Trump's cuts to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to kill dozens of children in Texas. And what has happened to the girls at Camp Mystic is exactly what one of the country's best meteorologists, John Morales, warned would happen, said Rachel Beitkoffer from the Christopher Newport University Center for Public Policy. Trump's cuts to NOAA and NWS have critically impacted storm prediction nationwide. Except Tom Fahey, the legislative director for the National Weather Service Employees Organization, told NBC News that weather forecasting officers were adequately staffed. Quote, they issued timely forecasts and warnings leading up to the storm. And then, so then you get the Trump supporters saying, well, this is not the time to politicize it. Well, that's true. But more importantly, it's not the time to mischaracterize it, right? If the answer was that cuts had led to the National Weather Service not being able to do its job, I would be on this show today telling you it's not politicizing it to call out the blame because it's too important and it's too urgent, and we have to make sure immediately it doesn't happen again. There's not evidence that that's the case. The top elected official in Kerr County, Judge Rob Kelly, said he was jogging along the river early in the morning and didn't notice any problems at 4 a.m. A little over an hour later at 5:20, he said, we almost weren't able to get out of the park. Now, here's an interesting point made by that same Rob Kelly. He said the county had considered a flood warning system along the river that would have functioned like a tornado warning siren about 6 or 7 years ago. Quote, we looked into that before, the public reeled at the cost. Is that the blame? I don't know. But again, and this is a different article. Now, this one is from PBS. The National Weather Service office in New Braunfels, which delivers forecasts for Austin, San Antonio, and the surrounding areas, had extra staff on duty during the storms. according to Jason Runyon, a meteorologist in the National Weather Service. Where the office typically would have had 2 forecasters on duty during clear weather, they had up to 5 on staff. So it was not because of Trump's cuts that this happened. There's a difference between saying you're politicizing an event and you're not telling the truth about an event. Here is an interchange. This is that same Kerrville city manager, Dalton Rice, who I quoted before. This is from today. He was asked about, this is number 12, on why the camps were not evacuated. See, now asking the local officials who were blaming the National Weather Service, now this reporter is sort of putting it on this city manager saying, well, wait a sec, why didn't you guys do more? Let's listen.
Yeah, well, one of the questions that still hasn't been answered 3 days into this is despite TEM's warning on July 2nd and July 3rd that something like this could have happened, that the threat existed, why that information didn't get down to the camps and why they weren't evacuated. Can you answer that now?
That is a great question, but again, we want to make sure that we continue to focus. We still have 11 missing children that we want to get reunited with our families. Until we can get reunited with our families, we are not going to stop. We are not going to stop until we do. So, thank you.
Follow-up question, sir. Was any emergency alert given out on the 4th that morning of? Did anyone get
Sir,
any
there are
alert?
families who deserve better than that.
And you know what? The reporter's right here. To say, well, you know, there are still families who are suffering because we're still trying to find their body. That's true. But it makes it all the more important to be asking questions now when the public is listening, when change could be enacted. I don't know the answer, right? But you can't just do the cop-out thing, which is to say, oh, well, you know, this is not the time. And, you know, this debate happens with gun control a lot, right? There's a mass shooting, and then people ask, well, the difference there is it's very hard to show the cause and effect between gun control laws and mass shootings. You can argue that the more widespread availability of guns makes it easier to get guns, but that's a separate question from, do gun control laws lead to less shootings? Here, there is definitely a way, a direct cause and effect that could have led these kids and other people to be warned to get the heck out of this area. There is no ambiguity about that. So it's not apples to apples to say, well, then you should be asking that question after every mass shooting. No. Because there's still uncertainty about whether gun control laws work or how well they work. Here, there is no doubt they could have gotten almost everyone out before it happened.